All right, so last month we had allegations of Satanism and candidates mowing former spouses down with vehicles. So the race for South Carolina's first congressional district could only get more substantive this week, and it did, with a debate over the issue of medical marijuana, and particularly votes out of Washington, D.C., involving one of the candidates, Nancy Mace. Now, Mace voted against a bill which would ostensibly decriminalize pot at the federal level. It's called the MORE Act. And the reason she did so is that the first-term Republican from Charleston, South Carolina, has put forth her own bill, the States Reform Act, which, according to Mace, vastly superior to the legislation the Democrats have proposed, the MORE Act, which was approved by a party line vote last week. Now, what are the differences? Well, I talked with Congresswoman Mace earlier today. We spoke, and she shared a little bit of the breakdown between those two bills and why she voted against that bill and why she's supporting her bill. The main reason, Mace said, federalism. Her bill leaves it up to states to decide what they want to do on the issue of medical cannabis. Basically, they can decide whether or not they wish to legalize it, not legalize it, and there's really no threat from the federal government as far as what that decision winds up being. Mace also said that her bill imposes a very low excise tax, federal excise tax on marijuana, 3%, which she hopes will discourage black market activity. The MORE Act, much higher tax rate. So that's a key distinction. The other thing that I found interesting about what Mace focused on, the targeting of medical marijuana or marijuana to minors, to children. Her bill would provide disincentives against that, whereas the MORE Act would not. So those were the main policy differences that Mace laid out as far as her voting against the MORE Act and continuing to support the States Reform Act. Now, that did not stop her opponent, Katie Arrington, from slamming Mace for alleged hypocrisy in voting against the Marijuana Decriminalization Act. But it was interesting, in her statement going after Mace, former Representative Arrington, who was colleagues with Mace at the State House back in the latter part of the last decade, in her statement, she pointed out that she did not feel this was an issue which was a priority amongst First District voters. And again, I'm not going to dispute that. I haven't seen recent polling, but I would say it is an issue that even amongst GOP voters, GOP primary voters, more than two-thirds folks believe that states should decide whether or not to legalize or not legalize. They believe that should be a states' rights issue. And if you throw in a doctor prescribing marijuana, that support goes up even higher. And again, talking about Republican primary voters here, that's a seismic shift from where this issue was just a few decades ago when GOP primary voters overwhelmingly opposed medical marijuana. Now, this issue continues to drive the debate in this state. You've got Mace, Tom Davis, and other leading Republicans out front on decriminalization, whereas you've got the state Republican Party actively opposing it. So you've got a real rift here, and it's going to be very interesting to see how that rift plays out in this primary, which, again, is a proxy war, folks. It is a early round battle, an early test of the strength of former U.S. President Donald Trump, who has come out against Nancy Mace, who has endorsed Arrington. This is one of two contested primaries in South Carolina where you basically got the MAGA endorsement up against, certainly in the 7th District, a more status quo Republican, but some would say the same of Mace. But you've got basically a proxy war here that's going to be incredibly fascinating as it continues to unfold. Our news outlet has covered that for several months now. In fact, we were the first to predict it, first to call out Trump's opposition to Mace, the first to report on that. We've been at the lead at every key point in this congressional primary, and we'll continue to do so. So for the very latest, keep it on FITSNews, folks.